Ghostwriter is speaking out. This absolutely fascinating piece from the ghostwriter JR in the New Yorker dropped on May 8th, 2023. Like many a New Yorker piece, it is lengthy, but it is completely worth the read. I'm going to go over some of the highlights for me personally in this video. The piece opens up with a little behind the scenes look at what goes into ghostwriting. So JR talks about a particularly tense moment in 2022 when he's on a very late night Zoom call with Prince Harry going over an edit that they disagree on. It's about one of the grueling military exercises that Prince Harry had to participate in which he was captured by pretend terrorists and tortured. It culminates in a vile dig against Princess Diana. Quote, Harry always wanted to end the scene with a thing he said to his captors, a comeback that struck me as unnecessary and somewhat inane. End quote. But from JR's point of view, quote, ending with what he said would dilute the scene's meaning, that even at the most bizarre and peripheral moments of his life, his central tragedy intrudes. Finally, JR loses it. It's like, dude, we've been over this. This is not a good way to end. For Harry, this is an important inclusion because all of his life he has been belittled for his intellectual capabilities, and that in this moment of sleep deprivation, food deprivation, torture, etc., he still had his wits about him. JR is still a firm no. And I think this is a really interesting insight into ghostwriting and what it means to write a memoir like Harry's. Quote, as strange as it may seem, memoir isn't about you. It's not even the story of your life. It is a story carved from your life, a particular series of events chosen because they have the greatest resonance for the widest range of people. And at this point in the story, those people don't need to know anything more than that your captor said a cruel thing about your mom. Harry eventually relents. JR then goes into his background and how he got into the ghostwriting business and the first book that he ghost wrote with Andre Agassi. It's super interesting, and JR is a fantastic writer. But for the sake of time, I'm going to skip to later parts in the article. And what's particularly interesting is when he learns what it's like to be a ghostwriter suddenly in the spotlight. Because while they were able to work on this book in a bit of a bubble because of the pandemic, eventually news leaked. JR had a clause in his contract about his right to remain unidentified, which this leaker blew the lid off of. Quote, I woke up one morning to find myself squinting into a gigantic searchlight. Every hour, another piece would drop, each one wrong. My fee was wrong, my bio was wrong, even my name, end quote. It gets very creepy as a Daily Mail reporter stares through his window at him. Paps photograph him taking his child to preschool. He gets a taste of what it's like to be Harry to some extent. JR goes on to say how his entire relationship with Harry was constantly misreported. Allegedly, they were introduced by George Clooney, which JR had never met George Clooney, so that didn't make sense. Quote, one day, though, I did share my frustration with Harry. I bemoaned that these fictions about me were spreading and hardening into orthodoxy. He tilted his head. Welcome to my world, dude. By now, Harry was calling me dude. End quote. And then we get to the publishing of Spare. JR seemingly questions whether the Madrid bookshop that put out copies of the embargoed version of Spare early on its shelves was in fact an accident. And as many of us assumed, those quick translations made on tight deadlines were garbage. JR says that the results of the translations read like bad Borat. Getting a look at the media through JR's lens is one of my favorite parts of this piece. Once the book was released, he says, quote, the bad translations didn't stop. They multiplied. The British press now converted the book into their native tongue, that Jabberwocky of bonkers hot takes and classic snark. Facts were wrenched out of context, complex emotions were reduced to cartoonish idiocy, innocent passages were hyped into outrages, and there were so many falsehoods, end quote. He brings up that Army instructor article, which I believe we talked about on here, where the Army instructor is quoted as saying what Prince Harry wrote was complete fantasy, and then later the Army instructor has to go online and post multiple paragraphs about how that's not what he said. And then he discusses the so-called errors, because that does become the single point of attack in JR's mind, although I would say personally that I think the other focus by the media is that this book was an attack on Harry's family. JR brings up the whole TK Maxx having clearance sales as an example, but also reminds the reader that Prince Harry has a hard time remembering specific people and dates, especially around the time of his mother's death. JR posits that maybe he remembers places better because they didn't let him down. JR decides to tweet about this after having a hard time just sitting there and watching these hot takes. which of course turns into headlines by outlets such as Harry's ghostwriter admits the book is all lies. JR told Prince Harry to trust the book when they were working on it. And Prince Harry said at the end at a celebratory party for the book launch that he was glad that he did trust the book and that it felt incredible to have the truth out there because it made him feel free. The piece ends with probably the easiest way to sum up what ghostwriting is, and it comes compliments of his 5-year-old daughter. She asks him over breakfast, "What is ghostwriting?" JR replies, "Okay, you know how you love art?" His daughter nods. He says, quote, "Imagine if one of your classmates wanted to say something, express something, but they couldn't draw. Imagine if they asked you to draw a picture for them." "I would love to do it," she said. "That's ghostwriting," end quote. It's a fantastic piece. I recommend that you check it out.